today. Particularly excited that we're going to have the opportunity for some Q&A, interactive conversations. I'm coming to you from Seattle, where it's uncharacteristically warm. So I apologize if I break a sweat. We don't build houses with air conditioning out here. We might have to start though. I have the privilege of working on strategy here at Datastax. And I've also had the privilege of working on helping large organizations in particular adapt to technological change for several decades now. And there's a lot of career longevity there, right? Because there's always a new wave of change. And we've probably, some or all of us have lived through open source and cloud and mobile, and now sort of the age of data and AI coming upon us. And this is actually, honestly, the one I'm most excited about, because I think fast data is for all. We all have customers. We all have more data than ever before, most likely. We all literally have free and open access to some of the most important and powerful tools for making the most of fast data. So the title of today's sessions is In a World Where Smart Apps Win Markets, Fast Data is the New Black. And I made it a little more tongue-in-cheek because it's data oil, is data gold. I think the new black because it really is for everyone. So before we kind of look ahead, let's look back. So these are literally 10 years of headlines about digital transformation. And you see there's sort of a theme here from 2010 to 2020. A lot of questions about how do you survive? Why is it so hard? We've just begun. What's next? Why do companies struggle? That was a consistent pattern for an entire decade. Not that great progress wasn't made, but it certainly didn't always feel easy. It certainly didn't always feel as fast as it could be. And then something terrible happened, but something funny happened on our way muddling through something terrible. And as we look ahead to coming out of the pandemic, we can look back on a really amazing success story. So here's a recent headline, right? In contrast to all these stories about digital Darwinism and are you on the losing end, CIOs look to capitalize on the COVID spotlight. In the main, IT, in particular enterprise IT, came through in the face of disruption with such flying colors, achieving business continuity or even delivering growth in some cases, which I think we'll talk about because there's a key role for fast data in there. CIOs have won accolades. They're taking center stage. They have a new role. And so the question is, what's the next act? The first act has brought these accolades, these kudos, this potential for a new, bigger, transformative role. Well, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit because when you're thinking about big trends and large organizations adapting, you try and look for sort of clear signposts, even though the world is a little messy in real life. And act one, if you could get people on a video conference quickly for business continuity, you deserve the accolades. If you could stand up the ability for people to order online when physical visits to stores were off limits and we could get our toilet paper and staples, or in my case, as important as toilet paper here in Seattle, coffee, you deserve the accolades, right? But as we look ahead, all the progress that was made to stand up digital capabilities, new interactions, generating more data has set the stage for a next second act, where my claim is fast data becomes super important, necessary in every respect, but the good news is possible for everyone. So this is some really fascinating research from McKinsey & Company. They've done great work documenting empirically what's happened in companies, in economies during the pandemic. So if they look back at their trends, their survey data trends, the digital customer interactions made 3 years of progress in the last year or so. The percent of products and services that were digitized made 7 years of progress. So we've essentially taken what might have been a slow or halting, gradual digitization of experiences and interactions with our customers and accelerated it by years. And now we're generating more data than ever before, more than we would have expected. But my thesis here is that's great. It opens up new possibilities for all of us. So the next act, I would say, is smart. We want to use the data to make every experience smart. But to be smart, you have to be fast. So let me go tongue in cheek a little bit here. Imagine an app that says, to have reached your destination sooner, you should have avoided the freeway. or that inconveniently tells you after you order, your order could have shipped free from a different seller. Now, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, and we say, who would ever ship such a broken app? But the point is that to actually be experienced as a non-broken app today, increasingly, it should be helpful in real time. And of course, you can come up with any number of examples where after the fact, is immensely frustrating. But even if you don't have a sort of comical after the fact frustrating experience, in the moment, we expect things to be helpful, to be smart in real time. Sometimes that means you need a latency of milliseconds around the transit of data and an interaction and triggering an action. Sometimes it's a little longer, seconds, minutes, but it's probably not hours, and it's definitely not days. So this is where fast data comes into its own. And so I think, beyond the examples of, Amazon or Google Maps, right, being helpful in real time, this is real, right? The world of the IoT, the world of digital transformation, that hard-fought transformation over the last 10 years that's accelerated in the last one. John Deere is as much a software company as it is a hardware company, right? This robots spinning at many cycles per second are able to use more than 400 sensors to manage almost inch by inch, optimizing the treatment of a field. This is something I think we're going to come to take for granted for everything: tractors, cars, apps, you name it, physical or digital. This is kind of where things are going. And we have the raw materials, right? We're generating the data. The question is just embracing it, right? And so, it's not acceptable to say you could have done a much better job spraying the field yesterday. So friends don't let friends write batch jobs, right? If we look ahead toward the future. That all sounds well and good, but how do we think about making it actionable? So I get to spend a lot of time interacting with our customers, with experts, understanding patterns for success, understanding anti-patterns. We do a lot of benchmarking to help not just ourselves orient to the market and set strategy, but to help our customers orient toward what will help them be more successful. So here's our sense of a little playbook they can share in the time we have together. So this is a definition from Forrester of fast data, and we like this definition. You can find different definitions, different terms. Gartner calls it continuous intelligence, but the real key point here is that data originates in applications. It's streamed and stored, but the key is it's immediately turned into a trigger for an action, detecting a pattern, helping with a decision, a next best step, a warning, guidance, alternatives, you name it. Fast data is all about being helpful in the moment that matters to the user. And again, that can mean milliseconds, seconds, maybe even minutes, but it's basically real time. And I think that's the crux of any definition you find. Can the data be helpful in real time? So the good news is there's an entire stack that has developed to help build applications that can handle fast data, that can be helpful in the moment, processing real-time data, providing recommendations, analytics, and decisions in the course of transactions, right? So you can detect fraud, you can authorize, upserve, prevent an error. Again, the variability can be really, really short to kind of long from a technology perspective. But again, the point is real time, in the moment, in context. And then this is actually the most important thing. So it's great that there's a set of technologies that are awesome for building fast data applications and delivering fast data experiences. But how do you figure them out? How do you get there? How do you figure out how to make the most of that technology? And if there's one thing that jumps out at me in the last year compared to those 10 years of digital transformation from 2010 to 2020, is the statement captured here by the CDO, amazing CDO at MasterCard. When I became the chief data officer, I had the question, what's our data strategy? Turned it around and said, what's our business strategy? Then I'll help you with the data requirements to achieve that strategy. I have heard that almost universally from CIOs, CTOs, CDOs, and to dozens of conversations in the last year. And we have very strong data that backs this up. This business domain accountability, right? And if you think about why, you need to have, in order to be helpful in the moment, in a smart way, in a way that matters to your customers, you need process intimacy. You need customer intimacy. What would be helpful in this context? And then the technologists, the CIOs, the CDOs can say, oh, if what you want to do is this, with this latency, with this scale, we can help you make it real. But you must have this business accountability to run your business with data. And that's a big change, I think, from the past, when there was a question, can IT adapt? Or IT needs to figure out how to make technology valuable. They're like, no, running a business means understanding how to use data to make experiences smart and helpful in context for your customers. That's fundamental business accountability. So translating that into these patterns for success that we've seen. So we, again, as I mentioned, we do a lot of survey work. And in this survey in 2020, what we uncovered was when you segment out companies based on how much progress they've made on their data capabilities and their AI readiness, the top 10% versus the bottom 10%, they're 6 times more likely to use what we see as sort of the archetypal fast data stack. It's built on open source technologies, Apache Cassandra, Apache Spark, Kafka, Elasticsearch, Kubernetes. It's built cloud native, right? These are modern apps. And you can think about it really simply. If you want a modern app, you want to build it on Kubernetes, you want to build it cloud native. Once you have streaming, you want a database, you need a database that can keep up with the speed of streaming. You probably want some stream processing to bring that intelligence into the mix. And then you also want to build for scale, because as we'll talk about, once you're smart, more data makes you smarter. So I think in the past, you might think about scale as a tomorrow problem. We're going to deliver an app, an experience, a digital service, digital product, and we have some expectations and goals for it. Maybe we'll get to a certain scale. We should probably bake it in that you're going to get to a scale that may be even bigger than you thought, maybe even bigger than you had projected years out. Because if you can figure out how to use data to make that experience, that app smarter, more data makes it even smarter still. So it's a virtuous cycle. Don't choke off that virtuous cycle. The companies using this stack, right, deploying all these, then by that I mean deploying all these technologies in concert in their organization, are 3 times more likely than those who aren't to attribute more than 20% of their revenue to data and analytics. And again, if you think about even the tongue-in-cheek examples I gave, it makes perfect sense to me, right? The apps that matter most, that we get excited about as consumers and like to use, are smart. They use fast data. They make the most of fast data. The products that are sort of setting the standard for industries, like John Deere, make the most of fast data. They're smart. Fast data opens up new types of business models, right? Like predictive maintenance, for example. So direct new sources of revenue straight up. And then finally, following this link in the chain, companies attributing more than 20% of revenue to data and analytics are twice as likely as those attributing the least to organizing data governance by business domain, right? Again, that process customer intimacy. How do we figure out what data matters most? How do we figure out how we'd like to apply it? It's a business accountability. It's fundamental to operating the business. And then the technologists can help to make it a reality, to scale it, to make it safe, successful, efficient, to ship quickly, and so on, which we'll talk about. So what does success look like? If I say there's this chain, is it a theoretical chain, or can we look out in the wild and say, like, well, actually, we can see like really specific examples. And my experience, again, this last year has been fascinating, thinking of the 10 years of start, stop, fitfulness, like will transformation happen? It's just over and over and over again. If organizations choose to act, they have an impact. It's not foolproof, but it's super deterministic. So here's an example. This is just a random public example, as you might imagine. I sort of collect these. I collect them from our customers. I collect them with actual research, but I collect them from just like, oh, reading online. I'm going to follow the breadcrumbs. So from the stack, right? So Walmart Technology blog a while back explained how they built an analytic platform using some of these key open source data technologies, Spark, Kafka, and Cassandra. Now they had some strong requirements for speed and scale, because this was an inventory system. So it makes perfect sense to me why they chose these technologies, and maybe even they ruled out almost anything else. But I think, it's a great example of, prior to some of the strategy statements you're going to see, at least publicly, they chose to build an awesome real-time infrastructure. That turned out to be a great decision, because this is chronologically later, right? Walmart's being applauded in the Fast Company for using AI to create value in the sort of top 10 way lately. When the online shift to online came over us during the pandemic, they built this feature called customer choice. It uses historical and real-time data to predict items that might be out of stock, something that may have been on the roadmap, right, for N years out, but became really timely, really fast recently. And so customer chooses an item that means a substitute. You can get some up to 5 smart options. You can pick what alternative you prefer. Those are stored, right? So the system gets smarter. So you can almost think about there's a convenience thing where I'm glad I'm not, SOL from something kind of like what I wanted, even if it's not my first choice, but it's almost Netflixy, right? You're actually helping me discover some new things I may even like better. So super interesting. They're able to do that super fast. They doubled their e-commerce sales, right? Which is a function of the disruption, but also just a function of being smarter and better and more appealing and offering this smart functionality. And how does that feed into strategy, right? It's not a one-off reaction to the crisis, although that may have accelerated where they were going, what they were doing when they needed to deliver it, right? This is from the most recent investor community meeting. For an increasing number of customers, right, part of their digital strategy, their data strategy, is to become more like a service, not just being utilitarian, but in ways that are smarter, take up less effort, serve ideas that are relevant and exciting, right? Think about relevance, dealing with convenience, providing that everyday low price, but also exciting, right? Think about that Netflixy, Spotify element. It's really, I think, an opportunity for every business. So there's a strategy, right, behind that is a steel thread through the choice of technologies to particular ways of delivering value and particular experiences toward how the company evolves. So you might think, okay, that's a funny way that you just outline this. Stack to value to strategy. Shouldn't it be strategy? We define where we're going. We target the value we want. And then that means we build a particular stack. Or shouldn't it mean strategy? More traditional, looking backwards, like how business and IT, so to speak, used to interact. We set the strategy. Then we have the project to build a particular stack. Then we're able to deliver value. Well, I think we want to get beyond the dual neon eye poke. In real life, this is one of my favorite sculptures. It's actually animated, and they're poking each other in the eye, right? It doesn't really matter. It's more about creating conditions of alignment. Much like if you look like back at going through the pandemic, there was alignment that we needed to act across every function, every role, and every organization. And that's what I want to propose today when we think about fast data. We should accept that there's a need to act and kind of be all on the same page asking how we move forward. So again, this is some extremely recent data. As we've dug deeper into fast data, we just completed this survey in March. Among the companies attributing more than 50% of revenue to data, or attributing more than 15 points of customer satisfaction uplift to data, over 80% say fast data is important to their competitiveness. And half, 50%, 49%, give it top box importance. And again, this does not surprise me at all, because you can look at many, many examples of how fast data experiences move markets, right? It's not an accident that Target's Circle app has 70 million users, right? Backed by the promise of never miss a deal. It's amazing that Nike's digital business has soared after they decided to pull back and no longer sell on Amazon, right? They just made incredible use of data and that relationship with the customer to provide fantastic experiences. But everybody can do this. So regardless of where you are on your journey, maybe you're at the end of your journey looking backwards and you're celebrating the big wins, great. Most companies are not at that stage in my experience. So here's what we've observed about a way to get people on the same page, to mobilize people for action. So I love the phrase strategy is a conversation, right? It's not top down, you must be told what to do. It's here's how we're looking at the world. Here's how to have a conversation across functions and teams and within teams on how to move ahead on the kind of the shared goal. 3 simple questions. Can you ship data products as fast as you ship apps? I think we've all gone through that era of transformation. We've probably all gone through kind of some DevOps journey where we know that we have to ship apps faster than we shipped apps in the past. So that applies to data products as well. Think about DevOps parallel to data ops, like lots of companies are on this journey. That should be a goal. Second, fundamental question: what data about their interactions with you are your customers asking for? This is a great way to surface, right? Fundamentally surface. We've got customers, we've got digital interactions. What might they find helpful? What are they not asking you for? But if you put your heads together, you could say, this might be helpful to customers, right? And it's a great test. If no one can answer this question about a product, an experience, a service, a customer segment, right? You're probably not set up for success using data. Because it's fundamental, like low-hanging fruit, it's data that's already there if you can find a valuable use for it. And then to kind of push the envelope, to think about these marquee examples like John Deere and Nike, Target, Home Depot, Walmart, who've really done amazing things in the last 2 years with data. How could you exceed your competition's net promoter score by 20% through data products? Challenge yourself to imagine that. So here's some inspiration to kind of tie it all back home. Again, this is sort of random reading I discovered. I just love this case study. Gordon Food Service, which I'd never heard of before, but it's a big company. They're in wholesale food distribution, more than 100 years old, 100,000 commercial customers, right? They've been on a journey, a DevOps journey. This is a public case study for Google Cloud. They went from 4 to almost 3,000 deployments a year, right? They're archetypal of an old school company embracing the idea you've got to be more digital, ship apps faster than ever before, and they're doing it, right? So I love this example, right? They're deploying new features and fixes 8 times a day on average, so they're able to deliver more customer value. A customer accidentally ordered 14 cases of onion rings. They updated the site, the functionality to trigger that real-time immediate warning. Did you mean to order so many, right? So great, fantastic example. Now I'm going to play devil's advocate and pretend this is not very data-driven, just so I can kind of play out how asking these questions could lead you down a similar 4,000 to 3,000 kind of trajectory in the data world, right? And I don't know the domain. I'm just kind of geeking out, being excited by reading this example. But I love this. So let's assume, devil's advocate, that the 14 is kind of a not very data-driven, right? It's best guess. Team used their best judgment. This seems like a lot for this particular product. So that's the threshold, it's hard-coded in. Okay, now what's next? How could you exceed that? What data might your customers want? How could you exceed your competitors' NPS? So think about the curve of value. Okay, based on my company's history, like maybe I sell a lot of onion rings. So you remove the false positives, right? You create a custom band, which is based on my behavior. Cool. Can I learn anything? You've got 100,000 commercial customers. Can I learn anything about how people are managing, inventory levels and stockouts by you providing companies like mine behavioral context? Am I in line? Am I different? Now, especially in the current context, could you add in real time, current context like seasonality, so I don't have to do the work of thinking about seasonality? I've probably got some idea in my head from experience for different products. Can you just give me the data? And can you do latest market forecasts, right? Can you incorporate the implications of consumer confidence, economic data, open table data? We've all seen a lot of things about people going out and predicting, the curve during the unlocks and lockdowns, right? Can you build that in to help me as a customer? And finally, can you give me instant advice from looking ahead at supply chain risk, right? Can you build in, I'm ordering this, I'm balancing, I want to carry as little inventory as possible versus I don't want stockouts, but it's like, whoa, the risk of not being able to get this, in the next 30, 60, 90 days is elevated, or not, right? Every customer experience we have can kind of walk through a similar exercise by just asking those 3 questions. And with the third, can we deliver the data products being the carrot, right? If we have these fantastic ideas to deliver value to customers, can we deliver at the pace of the market? So in summary, fast tracking, fast data. You know, three simple things. The stack, there is a well-defined stack, proven, amply proven to be awesome for delivering fast data experiences. It's open source. It's available literally freely and openly to everyone. And of course, there are companies like ours ready and willing and able to support the open source product, to provide a commercial product, or provide, you know, in our case, Apache Cassandra as a service. So take the ops away. That's key to shipping data products as fast as you ship apps. Value, getting on this journey to discover value and create value from data. What data about, ask what data about their interactions with you, your customers are asking for. What are they not asking for, but you might figure out could be delightful. Constant discipline to build into the culture, to build into conversations across functions, up and down, even with the board of directors. And finally, thinking big. How could you get a step function improvement over your competitors in customer satisfaction through data products? And you can think about this as just a lovely circle, right? Ask the questions, build the capacity, push the limits, or build the capacity, ask the questions, push the limit. Continuous improvement on that score. And we should all feel like it's possible, right? If you think about that parallel on the development, app development journey, right? Orders of magnitude, you know, improvements through DevOps, through new tools. We did the same thing with data, orders of magnitude improvements on the ability to handle data and ship data products. Technology's there. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. And I think we are switching over to Q&A.
We are indeed. Thank you very much, Bryan. There's been a lot of chatter going on throughout the course of your session, so you've certainly stirred some conversation, which is fantastic. So let's dive straight into Q&A here. So the first question says, I agree that digital acceleration has been boosted by the pandemic. Do you think we have missed out on potential improvements or discoveries that could have occurred with a more paced evolution?
My experience is, you know, we've met the enemy during pandemic, and it was talk. And I've had so many technology leaders say that we had a sense of what could be done, and we were subjected to sort of trying to talk through to consensus. And so I feel like we may have missed out on some directional improvements, right? Obviously, if you think about like retail is a massive shift toward, you know, pickup and delivery. It might have gone in a different direction over the last 2 years, but I think from a pure velocity perspective, I've just heard almost like unanimity that, you know, we were, and I hold myself to this too, we were our own worst enemy. We didn't embrace learning by doing, and that slowed everything down.
Thank you very much. Question quickly came in the chat I want to pick up on before I lose it here is, could you share how easy or difficult it is for new users to learn the features, for example, data modeling? And there's a follow-up to that. How do you rate OpCenter for administration and management? So the first one first. So could you share how easy, difficult it is for new users to learn the features, for example, data modeling?
Yeah, so I think, you know, context around this question, I think there's probably someone familiar with Datastax products and Apache Cassandra. We have spent a lot of effort reorienting the company in the last 2 years to making the power of Cassandra more accessible to more people and more organizations. And so we think about that in 3 ways, right? One is supporting the open source product. Hands down, you know, if you don't want to buy the commercial version or software as a service from us, great. Like there are use cases. That's like why people who love open source, right? We want to see Cassandra everywhere, and we'll provide support for that. The second is putting APIs in front of Cassandra that remove the necessity to learn CQL, which is Cassandra query language. So you can use a document API, a graph API, a REST API. So that's a big change from like how easy is it to get started. You can, you know, use it as a straight up JSON doc store through a document API and not even think about data models. Big change. And then the most important thing, how easy is it to get started is, and then, you know, what do I think of OpCenter? I mean, I think if you can use software at database as a service, you have the optimal operational footprint. And so, you know, what we call Astro, which is Cassandra as a service, is sort of our marquee product. And I think if you can use database as a service, not specific to Datastax in general, it's a great idea. Obviously, there will be use cases where you can't, but if you can, you should. And I think our data is pretty amazing, also in the 80% plus range. It's like, do organizations agree? Yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Is advanced replication, hybrid cloud, and managed services supported by Datastax?
We need my product management team here. Yes, yes. Cassandra replicates by design out of the box. So yes, I think there's probably some where I'm gonna pass on trying to give a definitive answer. But if you capture the question, we'll get somebody to give you a definitive answer.
No worries at all. Yeah, they ask.
That's great. I'm excited about that. But I don't want to lead people astray.
As a food manufacturer, have you done any studies regarding retailer point of sale data, sell through of products?
I haven't looked hard at that. I have heard fascinating things from some retail CIOs and CDOs, especially around the idea of there are many different data providers in sort of the retail and retail adjacent space, and technology providers, actual data providers. And what I've heard is sort of stitching together that ecosystem more offers a lot of potential, although it's also apparently not super easy. But
fantastic. They keep coming. Great examples, Brian, on fast data use cases, retail/BFSI. Have you seen similar impacts in slow to adopt tech areas like hospitals, say for improving patient experiences, wait times, admission times, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So the telehealth obviously exploded. And I think there's a few different data points I can share. One of the biggest sources of waste and also human suffering in the medical system is patient non-compliance, not because patients are necessarily unwilling to take medicine, but it's inconvenient, they forget. And so there's huge potential for telehealth and devices to literally save hundreds of billions of dollars a year around the world. But I also happen to have a friend who's a doctor who I've been chatting about the telehealth, and her point of view was telehealth had gotten a lot of pushback from fellow doctors saying, the customer won't like it. They want the face-to-face. And of course, as consumers, we love it if we can just do a telehealth call that takes 5 minutes with no waiting, because all the doctor has to do is ask us 3 questions and write a prescription, right? Which is great. You just saved enormous amounts of time and hassle. So I think telehealth is super exciting from both kind of a human and data perspective on how much it will help people, but also as a customer, it's great.
Yeah, definitely. We were talking earlier on about how kind of, the pandemic has maybe accelerated some innovation in certain industries. Question coming in here, do you also think COVID-19 has pushed companies over the technology tipping point and transform the business to think differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that ties back to this comment I made about using data and by extension technology to run the business now becoming a business accountability. And literally, example after example of different ways of doing it, but one crystal clear. Financial services organization, the CIO said, every general manager, this is business general manager, just got another job from the CEO. You own the data. You are the general manager of the data for your line of business, right? And so there's different flavors of this, but it essentially says it's not about IT trying to persuade the business side. Use this technology, use this data. It's the business saying, you are accountable for P&L impact often from data, right? And there's a great example of this is also financial services SVP. He's sort of the pointy end of the spear on the data transformation. And he said, we have data product owners for our data sets, and we have metrics for how well we're generating hindsight, insight, and foresight. What happened, why things are happening, and prediction. And so I've been at small companies, I've been at big companies like Microsoft, which are very metrics driven. And you want to change the behavior of a company, put a metric on a scorecard that drives executive compensation. I think I've seen more of that in the last year than in the last 10.
Love that. Hindsight, insight, and foresight. I'm stealing that one.
Yeah, I use that all the time. I was that's brilliant. Can I use that?
I like it. Do you see that fast data increases the ability for new staff to be more productive faster?
Yeah, I think the feedback loop, I mean, I think, let me put it this way. I'm a big fan. I've got a lot of friends who work at GitHub, and one of the value propositions of GitHub is, since people know it, they can immediately get productive, right? And so like even your own metrics, right, are familiar. Like you understand the feedback loop of checking in code and pull requests, and you have that whole mental model. And I think the same thing could be true of onboarding people into your own proprietary systems, or if your Microsoft shop or a Google Apps shop, just providing the immediate feedback loops and familiar kind of metrics and information. And, obviously the more people are familiar with tools, like whether it's Office or Google Apps or GitHub, the more productivity we get for free as employers if we're using those particular tools. And of course those tools keep getting smarter as well.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'm going to go back to the question we had in the chat earlier. Very candid question. How do you rate OpCenter for administration and
I don't know. I am not a hands-on administrator. I know a lot about ODBC to date myself in terms of Microsoft, or not Microsoft, in terms of database technologies, but I can read you marketing materials, but I think you want to talk to one of our hands-on folks about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Another question, just really for perspective, was, are there any other technologies that you think took a back seat to all these advancements because we lost focus due to the pandemic?
That's a great question. Technology's taking a back seat. It's hard to answer that hypothetical, right? I think it accelerated. I think over and over again, it accelerated plans people already had. Particularly if you think about, I'm not going to pick on any technologies, but technologies folks describe as legacy. It's their legacy. 10 years from now, we'll be using these or something different, and it became like 2 years from now. So I think it accelerated the pace of change, toward the new. And there's interesting things around like new technologies. Security took a back seat. We had to, yeah, fair enough. Took a back seat, and I think hopped over the seat to the front really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It was a very quick back seat ride, and then jumped straight into the front. So that was good. Okay, we've still got a few time for a few more questions. So I want to save that one for last, because that's a nice way to close out there. Do you believe any of the momentum towards cloud-based data lakes / warehouses slowed during the pandemic? And if so, do you expect this to pick up over the next few years?
Yeah, I think the transition to cloud has been accelerated on balance, maybe even during this period. And I think there's a lot of innovation going on around how do you make data more cloud native. We're certainly involved in that. And I think a couple different ways to look at it. You can look at it more from the analytics perspective, like if we're doing ETL or ELT, like how can we just do the T? Can it be in the cloud and we can just do the T in place and not have to do the E and L? Or from a more computer science perspective, database perspective, how do we containerize data? How do we make databases like an app running in Kubernetes? And if you're interested in that, I recommend Googling data on Kubernetes community. It's a very active group. We're involved in that. And that's really exciting about just making the flow of data, more fluid and automated, and, less about like, we've got to stand up a database on a server somewhere. And now the data is literally in a physical, location with a lot of gravity. So super excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. No, here we go. Have you seen if the board understands the implications of digital transformation and technology well enough to provide valuable guidance?
I think, that the guidance the board can give, I think, is more about if they appreciate the power and the value of data, I think the guidance they can provide is making it a priority, and perhaps, giving direction around is just like become more of what we've been, right? Whatever we stand for our customers, like, is it, we're Volvo and it's safety, right? Let's be more. How do we go further? Or is it, how do we use this to go in a different direction? Like the Walmart example, where it's just like, hey, we want to develop this new level of intimacy. So I think the guidance, at a board level, I mean, you don't want granular guidance from the board, right? So I think those two things are just, is it a top priority? And then is the orientation toward like, let's 10x what we are today, or let's build a new interesting direction, for our next 10 years or 100 years for some companies.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm going to go 2 more questions. First one, again, a candid question. Does fast data make higher quality products?
A fascinating question. I would say, like literally, I spent a little bit of time at Autodesk, and there's a use case called generative design, which is using data to actually generate designs for things. And like literally, yes, it does. It will make a better, you name it, physical product. I think it makes different products though. I mean, I think the interaction we have with something becomes different. And so, you can think of a lot of web apps. If you try to look at the 9s, you'd be like, oh, 4 9s, that's kind of cruddy, except that lots of the apps we love most are 4 9s. Because, we're not using them to like manage life critical systems. We're using them to like, get a recommendation for like an interesting new thing.
Great stuff. And then final question here, it's kind of like 2 questions I'm going to combine into one. So is, given the absolute need for digital transformation at a faster pace, what can companies do to move now and move fast? And the follow-up, I'll add on to that is, what do you think is next for digital transformation? So what can they do now to move fast? And what's next?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I go back to those 3 questions, there may be other questions. I'm saying it's the only true framework for using it. But I mean, just to get folks to agree, we are going to act, right? And ideally from the board to the C-suite on down, just saying we're going to act and we're going to ask these types of questions and we're going to give teams the ability to, deliver. That will include failure with learning, but it's not talk, right? It's do. And so in the long run, I love the book, Competing in the Age of AI. If you haven't read it, you should. I've known the authors, Karim Lakhani, Mark Ruinsidi, they're Harvard Business School professors, super smart folks, known them for decades. And their point is that AI is awesome at prediction. We make predictions every single moment of every day running a business, who to hire, what to order, you name it. And they're just like, look, the future is sort of this ubiquitous weak AI. It doesn't need to be rocket science, it needs to be amazing, but you can probably build some kind of predictive insight with data into almost every single business process. And I think they're right about that. So, I've read some really great quotes about, this doesn't sound very sexy. We're talking about 5% improvements, blah, blah, but you run 5% improvements, the operating model of like a multi-billion-dollar corporation, then that's pretty impressive. So I think that's where we're headed.
Lovely. Great way to close out that session. So thank you very much, Bryan. At this point, I always like to ask the audience to welcome me in a virtual round of applause. You can't see them doing it, but we're assuming they are. Great session, very great session, very insightful, very honest as well in your Q&A piece, which we always appreciate. And thank you very much, audience, again, so active, so many questions coming in, great collaboration going on in the chat box there. So thank you very much for your participation. So that is the end of